New polls show that the field is tightening as we move closer to the Iowa caucuses. In a brand new Fox News Iowa poll, Ted Cruz has now moved into first place with 28%, just edging out Donald Trump. He's got 26%. And Senator Marco Rubio now is in third place with 13%. Another new poll out of Iowa has Ted Cruz with a 10-point lead at 31%. Donald Trump comes in second. He has 21%, followed by Ben Carson and Marco Rubio, who are both in double digits. Now, those numbers out of Iowa are impressive, but in a brand new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll, Senator Marco Rubio does the best against Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton. In a potential head-to-head matchup, Rubio would beat Clinton 48-45. Here with reaction is the 2016 Republican presidential candidate, Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, good to see you. I know these polls, you're getting 100 numbers thrown at you a week. It's probably difficult to stand back and take them all in, but head-to-head is an important, only two people to beat Hillary in that poll head-to-head, and that was you and Ben Carson.
Yeah, look, they're interesting for people that follow politics on a daily basis. We've never paid a lot of attention to them because there's so much to go just before Iowa, not to mention the elections in November. But the fundamental difference now for us is we need to move forward on explaining to the American people why the right way forward is limited government, free enterprise, and a strong national defense. What we know for sure is this: we can't afford another 4 years like the last disastrous 7.5 years. And we need to, the next president of the United States needs to hit the ground running on day one to begin to reverse the tremendous damage that this president's done to America.
What about this revelation that we had today, and we'll get into more detail later in the program, that the Department of Homeland Security, well, number one, has 72 people on the no-fly list working for them, but number two, that according to the DHS secretary, that they wouldn't look at people's social media for fear it was an issue of optics about privacy and civil liberties when vetting people. Now, these are public forums. Yeah, this is social media by its definition.
And this is exactly why the American people increasingly have zero confidence that this administration has any idea on how to keep our country safe. We know, for example, that one of the early indicators of radicalization is what people are doing online. That is what ISIS is using to recruit fighters and radicalize people, including American citizens, to take up arms against us and join the war against the United States. To not look at that as a factor in determining whether someone should be allowed to travel here just defies all explanation. So how do you go to the American people who feel as insecure as they ever have in recent memory and say to them these things? And when they realize what's happening by this administration, they realize this is not an administration that is serious or knows what they're doing when it comes to keeping us safe.
How big an issue is when you have General John Allen, and you have James Comey, and you have James Clapper, and you have John Kirby, and you have Michael Steinbeck, and you have the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, all telling us that ISIS has a plan that they will infiltrate the refugee population, that we are not safe. And then you see that this woman in San Bernardino had posted all of her terrorist leanings on social media, and we don't even look at that. Is it now?
Yeah, it defies logic.
Does that tell us it's time for a pause in immigration?
Well, what it tells us, first and foremost, is that when it comes to allowing people into this country, we must realize that things have changed just in the last 2 years. You have a sophisticated terrorist group, ISIS, who understands our legal immigration system and is looking for ways to exploit it. So it's not just refugees. They are actively looking for people that can come to the U.S. as professionals, whether it's students or doctors. And so it's going to require even stronger scrutiny with regards to that. Again, not because America is a country that wants to turn anyone away, but because the most important obligation of the federal government is to keep us safe. And when you realize that your enemy is trying to attack you in a very specific way, it is irresponsible, it is reckless not to look at that and figure out ways to make it work better. They're not doing that.
And it's a dereliction of duty. Okay, you say it would be reckless not to have a plan. What should the best plan be? Is it a pause in immigration till we get it fixed? You know, you have said... Well, go ahead.
No, I mean, it's not just simply a pause. I mean, obviously, common sense still applies. I think it really depends on exactly where people are coming from, how much we know about them. There are people we know a lot about. They've been here multiple times. We know they own businesses. We know what they're involved in. And then there are people we just don't know a lot about, and there are open questions about them. And that's the kind of common sense application that I think we need. So you have someone that comes from Taiwan, has a business in California, comes 4 or 5 times a year. That's an easier person to vet. You have someone that's arriving for the first time who we know nothing about, that's someone you're going to have to take some time to look at, a little bit more careful and err on the side of caution. And that is the sort of approach we can take instead of this notion that somehow our immigration system needs to be a place in which, you know, we play political messaging games with it, which is what this administration does.
You don't think a pause for Middle Eastern refugees is a good idea for a time being?
Well, I have said that. I mean, especially because we know that ISIS is trying to exploit the Syrian refugee crisis. But again, if it's an 8-year-old child who is an orphan, you know, you can vet that, but the vast majority of people that are trying to come are people that we just don't have information on. You can run their name on the database 1,000 times. Nothing's going to pop up because there's no databases for people coming from Syria. And this is an issue that you have to be right 100%. You cannot afford to be wrong on even one, because if you're wrong on one, that could be an ISIS killer that's entered the U.S. and carries out a terrorist attack. There's no margin of error when it comes to this.
On the issue of immigration reform, you have told me a number of times the American people don't trust us to do any type of comprehensive reform. And you're saying we need to prove to them that we can secure the border. If you become president, how long do you think it would take to fully and completely secure America's borders?
Well, it would depend on how quickly Congress is prepared to move forward on a real border surge. For example, hiring thousands of new Border Patrol agents, completing fencing and walls in key and critical sections where people are crossing, more cameras, drones, and sensors. These things that will require to physically secure the southern border. We also need to put in place a mandatory e-verify system, which won't happen from one month to the next. That'll take time. We need a tracking system that tracks visa overstays. A better way, by the way, of vetting people before they come in on existing visas. All of this will take some time. It has to be passed by Congress. It has to be funded. So it won't happen from one day to the next. But I'm convinced that we can do it. We know how to do this. We've secured borders before. And we know how to do it. It's an issue of willingness. And once we do it, you will see the illegal immigration numbers come down dramatically.
All right, you saw the backslapping and congratulatory tone of people at this climate summit. It's non-binding. It's not worth the paper that it's printed on. But yet you would think that they just made the greatest deal in the history of mankind. What are your thoughts?
It's all for show.
What's that?
It's all for show. It's all for show. I mean, the whole thing is for show. Number one, as you said, they're not binding. Number two, the administration has committed the United States to certain caps, but hasn't told us how they're going to do it, which obviously means you're going to have even more of these sort of regulations. At least that's what they intend. Here's the most outrageous part. This is a deal that's going to require the American taxpayer to send billions of dollars to developing countries. Well, China considers itself a developing country. Does that mean the American taxpayer is going to send billions of dollars to China to help them comply with the arrangement here? And number four, let's be clear on the issue of China, the #1 carbon emitter in the world, and India, the #3 carbon emitter. They have said we're going to meet those guidelines, but only if it doesn't hurt economic growth. Well, guess what? It is going to hurt economic growth. That's why we shouldn't do it here. This is just, it's actually, quite frankly, an unfunny joke.
All right, Senator, congratulations on your poll numbers. We're now 48 days away. It's going to be interesting in Iowa. Thanks for being with us. And welcome back to Hannity. So last week, the Reverend Franklin Graham came out in support of Donald Trump's plan to put a temporary ban on Muslims immigrating and entering the U.S. Now, Graham wrote on his Facebook page, quote, "For some time, I have been saying that Muslim immigration into the U.S. should be stopped until we can properly vet them or until the war with ISIS is over." Joining us now to explain, the man himself from Samaritan's Purse, the Reverend Franklin Graham, who also brought his Operation Christmas Child shoeboxes. Yep. You know, you said something to me. You gave out 125 million of these so far.
Yes, and this year we'll have a little over 11 million this year, Sean. And we go to 110 different countries. Yeah. You've been with me, you and your wife and family.
By the way, it was an amazing experience. Because this is filled, look at this one. This is, you make it for a boy or a girl. Yep. This is obviously for a boy. It's got cars, and let me see if this airplane really works.
I'm not sure it does.
It actually does. That was pretty good. Crash landing. It's got cars, and it's got but it also has toothbrushes and slinkies, and I can see in there, and crayons and stuff like that. And you give these boxes age appropriate.
Yes.
And you see the look on their face, and we're spoiled. This box to them is like a huge Christmas for them.
For most of these children, as you know, Sean, have never had a gift in their life. And so when you can give them a gift, and of course at Christmas, I want the children of the world to know the true meaning of Christmas. I want the children of the world to know that God loves them and that God sent his Son from heaven to this earth to take our sins, and that he died in our place for our sins, and God raised him to life.
And
I
you
want the
tell them
children
that
to
when
know.
you see them, and then you give them a gift, and the kids light up like there's no tomorrow.
No question.
It's an amazing thing to see.
It's a great tool to just show God's love to the children of this world. And this year, again, 11 million boxes, and so I thank God for each box. Every box is different. They're like snowflakes, no two alike.
Right.
And God uses these gifts in a remarkable way.
And if people want to send them, just go to
SamaritansPurse.org.
And that's it.
That's
SamaritansPurse.org.
And all the information on how to pack a shoebox, where to send the shoebox. And
I give people a hint. The kids like the bigger plastic ones.
Those are great. I like the Tupperware type.
The Tupperware ones.
Oh, those are great. Great boxes.
You can get a lot more in there, too.
You can.
Yeah.
You know, Sean, when we look at the world in which we're in, our nation is in trouble.
The world's
in trouble. Starting in January, I'm going to run a campaign for God. And I'm going to all 50 state capitals. None of the candidates are going to all 50 states. I'm going to all 50 state capitals, and I'm going to hold a prayer service at noon, starting in Des Moines on the 5th of January, holding a prayer service and asking the churches to pray for their nation, to pray for their state, and I'm going to encourage Christians to get out and vote. I'm not going to tell them who they vote for. I'm not going to get behind any political candidates. I'm disappointed in the Democratic Party. I'm disappointed in the Republican Party. I'm disappointed in the Tea Party. And I can tell you that the hope for this nation is not in these systems.
Why are you disappointed in the Tea Party? You had me up to there.
No, because nothing has happened. And I'm just, Sean, I think people have some good intentions, but they get into Washington and our system is broke. And the only hope is God, Sean. It's not these political systems. The only hope for America is God, and if our nation turns back to God. So all 50 states, I'm going to be there at noon.
That's amazing. And you're going to just go state to state to state?
State to state.
How many days?
We'll be at one day at each state capital.
You know, there's no doubt about this, and this is my greatest fear, because I've got young kids. I think I've had a pretty full life so far. You know, I'm still young, I hope. I got a few more years in me. I look at the country and the world in a major decline, and to see the U.S. in decline this way breaks my heart, because we were a special nation set apart with special blessings. I think these years have been brutal on the economy. I think these years have been brutal with America's absence in the world stage. And you see who's filling the void. You know, if it's ISIS or Putin or the Iranian regime that our president is insanely negotiating with, it's scary. All right, so you're staying out of it. You're not going to endorse anybody.
I'm not going to endorse any candidates, no. I'm going to stay completely out of it, but the goal is to get Christians to vote. And we look at a lot at the national level. We look at who's going to run for president.
Do you think Christians stayed away from Mitt Romney in the last election?
There's no question. Millions stayed away. But there's just Christians who don't vote. They think that their vote doesn't count. It does count, Sean. Every vote counts. And in elections, as you know, most elections are not determined by millions of votes. This is determined by sometimes hundreds or dozens of votes in smaller elections. But I want people to vote and look at things like school boards. Could you imagine if evangelical Christians were able to get on the school boards and control the school boards of America, the impact that would have on our nation for the next 20 years?
Could you imagine taking condoms out of schools? I mean, the left would go insane. I don't mean to push you. Look, I don't even want to push you on this Muslim issue. To me, you know, I have a list here in front of me. General John Allen, FBI Director Comey, National Intelligence Director James Clapper, Assistant FBI Director Michael Steinbeck, John Kirby, State Department spokesman, the head of the U.S., the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, all warning that ISIS is infiltrating.
No question.
The refugee and immigration system.
No question.
And to me, until we get it fixed, it's just common sense to put a pause. But people say it's bigoted and horrible.
Well, Sean, I'm not against Muslims coming to this country, but there's got to be a system for them to be vetted. We're helping the refugees as they come into Greece. We have people on the beach as they come out of Samaritan's Purse, as they come out of their boats. We help them. We get them to the UN processing center, and then as they go through Europe, we have meeting points throughout Europe where we meet with them.
Give them food, water, supplies.
Shelter, and sometimes they just want to get information. We try to give information to them, but there's a lot of families, and some of them have been broken up, split apart. Some of them have died at sea, and it breaks your heart when you see this. But mixed into this, you see a lot of young men who are military age coming by themselves. They're coming from Syria. They're coming from Iraq.
President denies this.
They're coming from Iran.
President denies this.
No, we're there, Sean. We see it. We see it. They're there. And I don't know who these people are. When they get out of the rubber boats, they're nice and they're very grateful for our help, but you don't know who these people are, and we should not be letting these people come in.
We shouldn't gamble with the lives of Americans,
No,
and we are. And to me, that's simple, basic common sense. But this president is insistent on ignoring the advice of these people. Anyway, more importantly, this is a great... I learned a lot when I went on the road with you. To see the light in these kids' eyes, you know, they light up like a Christmas tree, to use an analogy, and they have the greatest time. SamaritansPurse.org.
Yes, sir.
All right. And
Operation Christmas Child. Yeah. And we ask people, as you pack the box, pray. Pray for the child that's going to get the box. I don't know who will get it, but God does. And if we pray, God answers the prayer of one righteous person.
You can sneak a $10 bill in there, too.
Can you imagine 11 million people praying? That's what God might do.
Listen, it's a pretty amazing thing. 125 million is pretty impressive.
That.
Every year you've been here to tell everybody about it, and I know our audience loves what you're doing. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Do you have a warning for GOP leaders?
Look, I understand what they're going through. I wasn't supposed to be here. I was a member of the establishment 7 months ago. I gave $350,000 to the Republican Governors Association. I'm not supposed to be doing this. You see, I'm supposed to be on the other side writing checks and having people do whatever I want.
So what do you say to the Republican leaders?
Puppets. I say, folks, you know, I'm sorry I did this to you, but you got to get used to it. It's one of those little problems in life.
All right, that was Donald Trump's answer when asked what he thought about the report that Republican leaders are mulling the idea of a possible brokered convention. Joining us now with reaction, the author of the new novel, Duplicity, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, also a Fox News contributor. Well, Donald's pretty good at making news, but there's been a lot of talk behind the scenes. Establishment figures don't like the fact that both Trump and Cruz are doing so well. And it sounds to me like they want to pick up their toys if they lose, and they want to go home, especially after years, in years past, they've said to conservatives, suck it up, vote for John McCain, vote for Bob Dole, establishment candidates. Thoughts?
Well, I think, first of all, you can understand the anxiety of the traditional old guard. I mean, as you just pointed out, your two front runners now are Trump and Cruz, who are the two people that the establishment would probably least like to see as the nominee. Maybe Dr. Carson would be third. But these three between them now have 65% of the vote, and that poses a real problem. If you are a traditional insider Washington politician, these guys represent the end of your world, or they certainly represent a big threat to your world. And so you have all this talk, but remember, you don't get to a brokered convention because a handful of bosses want to get there. The only way you're going to have a convention that is brokered is if 4 or 5 of these candidates each do well enough that nobody can get to a majority. That's the only way you get there. And that's way beyond the control of anybody in Washington, D.C.
So even if you don't think there might be some shenanigans behind the scenes, why don't you stay in the race a little bit longer, especially in these states that might split the delegation or in those particular cases? You know, because what sounds like to me, Ronald Reagan wasn't liked by the establishment when he took on a sitting president. And with all due respect to you, there were a lot of people who didn't like you because you took the Republicans after losing for 40 straight years, 40 years in the wilderness, and you were a bold, dynamic, revolutionary man of change. And you kind of shook a few, you rattled the foundations a little bit yourself.
Sure, look, and I actually personally think that it's very healthy in the current environment for the United States to get rattled. I think you have bureaucracies that are absurdly incompetent. You have rules that are ridiculous, and you have national security policies that are a genuine risk to our safety. So I'm for pretty dramatic, bold change. But all I'm reporting is somebody who's been through this and who knows these players. If one of them, either Trump, let's say, or Cruz, suddenly catches fire, they're going to be the nominee. I mean, there's nothing the old establishment can do to stop them. What gets interesting is you have some people, Chris Christie's a good example. Christie's had a very good couple of weeks in New Hampshire. He is a great retail politician. All of a sudden you could imagine, what if you had Cruz win in Iowa, Christie win in New Hampshire? Well, first of all, what does that do to Trump's image of invincibility? and what happens going next to Nevada and to
Christie's
South Carolina.
Still at 9%, though, in New Hampshire. I mean, Trump's in the 20s. That's a long haul from 40 in 58 days.
It's a long haul, and it's 2 months to go. These things can change. Remember, at this point in 2007, John McCain didn't exist. He'd gone broke.
That's a good point.
His campaign was out of money. He had been the front runner. Now he was alone in New Hampshire with one aide. On the other hand, I have to tell you, Sean, I did not expect this, but I am really looking forward to tomorrow night's debate, because you're going to have Trump in the middle with Carson on one side of him and with Cruz on the other side. And I agree with the comments in the last interview you did. Cruz is far and away a better professional debater than Trump. On the other hand, Trump's probably a much better barroom brawler than Cruz. And so you're going to have two radically different styles. And next to them, you're going to have, you know, Dr. Carson, who has to recover on national security, has to prove he could be commander-in-chief. So there's going to be a lot of drama on those three people in the middle of that debate tomorrow night. I think it will be fascinating.
But at 65%, you make all great points about John McCain and where he was and where he came and how he battled his way back. Very legitimate points. But this year, one thing has been steady, and it has been consistent. The only people to rise to this level of stature to be in the top tier, and I'll include Carly, and I'll include Ben Carson, and I'll include Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, they've all been outsiders. The one constant has been that the Republican base is fed up. And I cite the Fox poll. I think I've referred to it as the Washington Post poll. The Fox poll, 60-some-odd% of Republicans feel betrayed by their party. That has been the one constant. So how do you imagine that changing between now and Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina?
Oh, I don't think it does change. I mean, I think my advice to everybody in Washington is don't pay attention to the candidates. Pay attention to the voters. If there are that many voters who are that angry, what is it that the Republican leadership has failed to do, and what is it that we have to learn from where we're going? And candidly, I think having Paul Ryan come in as Speaker is a step in the right direction. I think you're going to see a lot more steps towards change, and I think it's not always going to be easy, but I think you are going to see a continued move in the right direction. Plus, remember, behind all of this are these terrorist activities that are both legitimately frightening the American people and are proving that our current government is so dumb, it's on the verge of insanity. I mean, how could you vet somebody's visa and not look at their Facebook page? As a rule, by the way, this wasn't an accident. This wasn't sloppiness. This was a rule in the Obama administration to not look at social media while promising us that we were going to be protected from people who are on Facebook saying, I love jihad and I want to kill Westerners. Now, that's really verges on insanity.
You know, when you think about ISIS now has the ability to make their own passports. ISIS has a stated plan to infiltrate the refugee population. The Democrats are standing by, accepting them and taking them in. Trump lays out his plan for a temporary ban, seems to be backed up by our national intelligence officers that are saying it's dangerous. And I got to be honest, I think that all of these guys in D.C., including Hillary, have no concept of what real people are thinking here.
Well, remember, the odds are very high we're going to have more incidents. You just had 3 false bombing threats over the weekend in major places. And here's what I'm struck with. Republicans, particularly Trump, but Republicans in general over here saying, look, if I have to offend a few people in order to protect Americans, I'm willing to save American lives by offending people. Democrats are increasingly over here saying, look, if I have to risk a few American lives to make sure I don't offend anybody, I'm willing to risk American lives. That's how big the gap is now between the two worldviews.
Yeah. All right, so tomorrow, before the debate, you get 2 phone calls. One is from Donald Trump asking you how to deal with Ted Cruz, and one is from Ted Cruz asking you how to deal with Donald Trump. What do you say to each of them?
I say the same thing to both of them because I think Cruz was brilliant yesterday. Use humor, not anger. This country doesn't need to see 2 of our frontrunners beating each other up. This country needs to see 2 guys who are potentially a ticket, 2 guys who are competent and smart, 2 guys who care about the country, and to the degree, I predict this, whichever one of them is better at using humor tomorrow night will have a big advantage in the debate.
All right, Mr. Speaker, like you, I'm looking